Imagine paying the equivalent of, like, a month's rent just to stand in waist-deep mud, lungs burning, torrential rain threatening to totally ruin your camera gear.
I had all of that.
For exactly 60 minutes of time.
Yeah, I mean, on paper, it sounds like absolute misery.
Right. But then the dense, tangled ferns part, the air fills with this sharp, pungent musk. And you lock eyes with a 400-pound wild silverback mountain gorilla just a few feet away.
And suddenly, every single blister, every dollar spent, it all just evaporates.
Exactly. Welcome to the Phil and H Travel Podcast. Is it worth it? Today, we are targeting a destination that honestly feels like it exists on another planet.
It really does.
We are taking you deep into southwestern Uganda, right on the jagged edge of the Albertine Rift, to a place appropriately named the Bwindi Impenetrable National Park.
And, we are tracking the roughly 459 mountain gorillas that live here. For context, that is half of the world's entire remaining population.
Half the world's population in one forest. So, our mission for you on this deep dive today is to completely deconstruct the reality of what it actually takes to pull this trip off in 2026.
Because let me tell you, the logistics are, well, they're just as dense as the forest itself. We are looking at a hyper-complex ecosystem here. It's where extreme luxury crashes right into raw, unpredictable wilderness.
Which is exactly why we need to unpack this with a rapid-fire overview of the stakes before we really get into the weeds.
Go for it.
Okay, so we are going to break down the real 2026 costs, starting with that mandatory gorilla trekking permit, which, by the way, sits at $800 for one single hour of contact.
Just 1 hour. And we're also looking at domestic bush flights hitting $450 and, luxury jungle lodges that routinely demand $1,000 a night.
Yeah, but we're also going to reveal the life-saving Kigali shortcut, which can cut your agonizing 10-hour drive down to just 4.
Thank God for that shortcut.
Right. We'll dig into the geography that recently trapped travelers during the massive March landslides. And we're going to expose 3 logistical traps that swallow almost every first-timer whole.
And we also have an obligation to tackle the honest safety picture. Bwindi sits right on the border with the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Yeah, that's a big factor.
It is. You are looking at a level 3 U.S. travel advisory, highly complex local laws, and mandatory health requirements, like the yellow fever vaccine, which will literally get you turned away at the border if you ignore them.
Right. And because we want you to have the full picture, we will be covering 2 distinct alternatives to Uganda, really diving into the great Rwanda debate.
Oh, the Rwanda debate. That's a huge one.
It is. And finally, we will deliver the absolute no-spin verdict. I mean, is this grueling, expensive journey actually worth it for backpackers? What about mid-range travelers? Family?
Free seekers? Digital nomads?
Exactly. We are putting Bwindi through the ultimate matrix.
But to really grasp what we are dealing with, before we talk about dollars and logistics, I need you to mentally place yourself in the environment.
Okay, set the scene.
We are talking about stepping into a 321 square kilometer UNESCO World Heritage Site.
That's massive.
Right, and this isn't your standard national park with paved scenic overlooks or whatever. You are transitioning from the macro world of global air travel right into the micro environment of one of the most biologically intense, tangled, ancient forests in all of Africa.
Hence the name Impenetrable.
Exactly. You are entirely surrounded by a canopy that just blocks out the sun. It is incredibly loud with insect and bird life, thick with equatorial humidity, and physically demanding in a way most people simply cannot prepare for.
And yet, despite that incredible biodiversity, let's call it what it is, people aren't enduring terrible dirt roads and spending thousands of dollars to look at rare ferns or exotic birds.
No, definitely not.
They're crossing oceans for one highly specific, highly regulated transaction: to stand in the presence of a mountain gorilla.
That is the ultimate core transaction of this entire economy. The Uganda Wildlife Authority, or the UWA, they control this access with an iron fist.
Which they have to, right.
They do. In 2026, they charge foreign non-residents exactly $800 for a standard permit. And that piece of paper buys you exactly 1 hour with a habituated gorilla family.
1 hour.
Not 65 minutes, 60 minutes.
Paying $800 for 60 minutes is it's like paying premium Super Bowl ticket prices for a one-act play.
It really is.
It forces the question, what makes this infrastructure so wildly complex? Why is an hour in the mud baseline priced at $800?
Well, because that $800 is doing heavy lifting far beyond an entry fee. It is a fundamental economic engine for conservation.
Okay, walk me through that.
You have to look at the sheer manpower required to keep these animals alive. That money funds 247 armed anti-poaching patrols. It funds the veterinary teams that actually dart and treat gorillas if they get caught in a snare.
Oh, wow, they have actual vet teams on standby.
Yeah, dedicated teams. And it funds the community revenue sharing programs that disincentivize local farmers from cutting down the forest for agriculture.
So you aren't just buying an experience, you're essentially paying the gorilla's security detail and property taxes.
That is a brilliant way to look at it. And what's fascinating is the hierarchy of these permits. I mean, if 1 hour isn't enough, there is a habituation permit available for $1,500 US.
Wait, $1,500. For how long?
That gets you 4 hours, but the dynamic is completely different. You are with a semi-habituated family trekking alongside the actual researchers.
Okay, let's define habituated and semi-habituated, because I think people assume these gorillas are basically tame. They aren't in a zoo.
Not at all. Habituation is an incredibly painstaking, multi-year psychological process. Researchers spend years slowly following a wild gorilla family day after day.
Just following them around.
Yeah. Initially, the gorillas might charge or flee. The researchers have to mimic gorilla behavior, like grunting, chewing on leaves, submitting to the silverback, until the family essentially accepts humans as a neutral, non-threatening presence in their environment.
That sounds terrifying and amazing. So what's a semi-habituated family?
A semi-habituated family is still in that unpredictable transition phase. So paying $1,500 for 4 hours means you are paying for the raw, volatile process of that psychological conditioning.
It sounds thrilling, but also, exhausting. Is there any financial reprieve for someone who wants the standard 1-hour trek but can't stomach the $800 price tag?
Yes, actually. To drive low-season tourism, Uganda offers discounted standard permits in April, May, and November of 2026.
Oh, nice. How much?
Those drop to $600 US, but you are kind of trading money for misery because those are the wet months. And the overarching point of all these prices, whether it's 600, 800, or 1,500, is to create a financial barrier that strictly caps visitor numbers.
Because of the disease risk, right? I read that they're incredibly susceptible to human illnesses.
Exactly. We share roughly 98% of our DNA with mountain gorillas.
98%? That's wild.
It is. But that genetic proximity is a double-edged sword. It means looking into their eyes feels like looking at a distant cousin. But it also means a standard human rhinovirus, like a basic cold, can absolutely decimate an entire gorilla family because they lack our immunities.
So the pricing limits the footprint to protect their health.
Precisely.
But securing the permit is really only half the battle. You actually have to reach them, and the sources highlight just how incredibly volatile this physical environment is.
Deeply volatile. The geology itself works against you.
How so?
Well, Bwindi sits on the edge of the Albertine Rift, which means the terrain is characterized by intense shear drops and incredibly unstable soil when it rains. Let's look at a concrete example that stranded travelers.
Okay, what happened?
In March of 2026, heavy rains triggered massive, catastrophic landslides. We are talking about entire hillsides just giving way. Yeah, this completely blocked the Hakikona Road, which is the vital artery connecting the Rushaga and Rubuguri sectors in the south.
So this wasn't just a muddy puddle slowing down a jeep.
No, this was thousands of tons of earth wiping out the only access route. It completely cut off those southern tracking sectors.
So what did the tourists do?
Tourists were trapped at their lodges, completely unable to reach the briefing points until heavy earth-moving machinery could finally be deployed to carve a new path through the debris.
That is wild. I mean, you could have your $800 golden ticket firmly in hand, your boots laced up, but the mountain itself just decides you aren't going that day.
Pretty much, yeah.
And beyond the geology, the political geography is just as complex. We need to talk about the security context impartially because it is a massive factor.
It is vital to lay out the objective safety profile here. The U.S. State Department currently holds Uganda as a whole at a Level 3 Reconsider Travel Advisory.
Level 3, okay.
Right. Furthermore, the UK's Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office The FCDO explicitly warns of the risk of banditry and violence, specifically near the border with the Democratic Republic of Congo.
And Bwindi shares that border.
Exactly. Bwindi Impenetrable National Park shares a porous border directly with the DRC.
It's quite a paradox, honestly. You have a level 3 travel advisory. Explicit warnings of banditry on a highly volatile international border, unpredictable, massive mudslides, and yet right in the epicenter of all of this, you have an ultra-premium, high-end tourism infrastructure functioning against all odds.
It is the ultimate logistical miracle. I mean, despite the landslides and the advisories, you have a fleet of domestic bush flights operated by companies like Aerolink.
Flying right over all of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They are flying Cessna Caravans from Entebbe International Airport directly onto dirt airstrips like Kihihi and Kisoro, right on the edge of the park.
What do those flights run?
Those flights run $250 to $350 US one way, or $450 to $600 round trip.
So you are flying on a premium ticket, sipping bottled water, looking down over a landscape that might literally wash away the road to your luxury lodge.
That's the reality.
Which brings us to the next massive piece of the puzzle. Since landslides and weather directly dictate if you can even use that $800 permit, understanding the timing, the seasons, and the climate reality is critical.
Timing is literally everything in Bwindi. It dictates the entire physical nature of your experience.
Because of the mud.
Yeah, it is the difference between a challenging, sweaty hike on solid earth and a truly miserable, humiliating experience sliding backward down vertical mud banks.
Okay, let's break down the climate reality, because I think when people hear African rainforest on the equator, they picture like steaming, sweltering, unbreathable heat. What is the actual temperature?
That is the first major misconception. Bwindi is high up. The park elevation ranges from 11,160 meters to a towering 2,607 meters.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because of this altitude, the temperatures are remarkably moderate year-round. You are looking at daytime highs of 72 to 77 degrees Fahrenheit.
Wait, really? Which is roughly
22 to 25 degrees Celsius.
That's room temperature. That's incredibly comfortable.
Exactly. And at night, it drops noticeably. You are looking at 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit or around 10 to 12 degrees Celsius.
So it's actually chilly.
Very. You don't need air conditioning. You actually need a fleece jacket and a hot water bottle in your bed. The temperature isn't the enemy in Bwindi.
The rainfall is.
The rainfall is the defining variable.
So let's map out the dry season dynamics. When should you ideally go?
The primary dry season runs from June through August, with a secondary short dry season from December through February.
Is there an absolute sweet spot in there?
January and February are generally the absolute driest months. The skies are clearer, the incredibly steep trails are relatively firm, and the lighting is fantastic for photography.
Okay, that sounds ideal.
It is, but June through August is the peak tourist season. If you want to travel then, you must secure your permit 6 to 12 months in advance. The lodges will be at maximum capacity, and you will be paying peak pricing across the board.
All right, so that's the dream scenario. Now let's talk about the nightmare scenario, the wet season.
Right. March through May, and then September through November. These months bring torrential, relentless downpours.
We talked about the discounted $600 permits during April, May, and November, so you save $200. But during the wet season, this impenetrable forest turns into a vertical slip and slide. Is saving that money really worth the physical torture?
If we look at the mechanics of the terrain, it is a massive gamble. The soil here is largely clay-based.
Oh, no.
Yeah. When it gets saturated, it doesn't just get mushy, it gets incredibly slick like wet ice. That is what causes those catastrophic landslides we talked about in Rushaga. You are trying to pull yourself up a 45-degree incline, grabbing onto thorny vines, while your boots just slide backward with every step.
And what about the gorillas? Do they behave differently in a torrential downpour?
Absolutely. Gorillas are primates. They don't enjoy being soaked any more than we do.
Fair enough.
In heavy rain, they don't wander around feeding in open clearings. They naturally seek shelter deep within the thickest, darkest brush. They huddle together, crossing their arms to stay warm.
Which completely ruins the photography aspect.
Totally. You are trying to protect your expensive camera lens from a deluge, dealing with terrible low-light conditions and trying to spot a dark animal hiding in deep, dark shadows.
That sounds miserable.
You might save $200, but you could spend your entire 1 hour shivering in the mud, staring at the hunched back of a silverback hiding under a massive fern leaf.
Okay, that paints a very clear picture of the weather. But what about the crowds? A lot of people hear peak season in June and August, and they picture Yellowstone or Disney World. Just endless lines of tourists in bright rain jackets crowding around a gorilla.
That is one of the biggest myths about Bwindi. The forest itself is never, ever overcrowded.
How is that possible if it's peak season and all the lodges are full?
Because of the strict mathematics of the permit system, the Uganda Wildlife Authority legally limits visitors to exactly 8 people per habituated gorilla family per day.
8 people total.
Yes. That number is inflexible. It doesn't matter who you are or how much you offer to pay, a ninth person is not joining that group.
So the isolation is guaranteed by law.
Precisely. Whether you go in the absolute busiest week of July or the quietest, rainiest week of November, when you are actually in the forest, it will only ever be you, your ranger, your local porters, and a maximum of 7 other tourists. The physical wilderness experience remains completely pristine.
That is a fascinating distinction. So the crowd isn't actually in the jungle. Where do you feel the crowd?
The crowd impact only hits your wallet and your logistics.
Yeah.
You feel the congestion when you try to book a room and find out every luxury lodge is sold out a year in advance. You feel it when the domestic flight prices surge and availability disappears.
I see.
The crowding in Bwindi is purely economical, not environmental.
Okay, so now that you know when to go to avoid triggering a mudslide, let's shift the focus to what this actually looks and feels like when you arrive. You step off the plane or cross the border. What are your first impressions of this environment?
Your entire arrival experience is violently dictated by which of the 2 main logistical paths you choose.
Let's start with the classic route flying in from within Uganda.
If you land at Entebbe International Airport, the classic premium move is to take that Aerolink bush flight. You fly 90 minutes west and you land on a literal dirt runway in Kigali.
A dirt runway.
Yeah, this airstrip is just carved out amidst vast, incredibly green, rolling tea plantations. From there, you climb into a specialized 4x4 vehicle for another 90-minute spine-rattling drive of deeply rutted dirt roads to reach the northern Bohoma sector of the park.
That sounds incredibly cinematic. Very old-school explorer. But also a bit exhausting before you've even checked into your hotel.
Yeah.
What is the alternative? You mentioned a smart route earlier.
The smart route, which savvy tour operators now heavily push, is actually to bypass flying into Uganda entirely.
Why pass it?
Yeah, you fly into Kigali, the capital city of neighboring Rwanda, and you drive north across the land border into Uganda.
That feels counterintuitive, flying into a completely different country to reach a Ugandan national park. Why does that work?
It's about infrastructure. And the first impression on this route is a jarring, fascinating visual contrast. Rwanda has invested heavily in perfect, immaculate tarmac highways. You glide smoothly out of Kigali for a couple of hours.
Nice and easy.
But the absolute second you cross the Cyanika or Katuna borders into Uganda, that perfect tarmac simply vanishes. You immediately hit Uganda's rugged, potholed Murum roads, their term for the ubiquitous red gravel and dirt roads that define the region.
So you cross an invisible line and instantly travel back in time. Infrastructurally speaking, you're bouncing along these red dirt roads. What does the actual geography look like around you?
You are steadily climbing into the Kigali Highlands. The locals and tourists alike call this the Switzerland of Africa, and visually it really earns that title.
What does it look like?
You are surrounded by these impossibly steep, vividly green hillsides. And what's amazing is that local farmers have hand-terraced almost every inch of them to grow crops. In the distance, you see jagged volcanic peaks. The deep, plunging valleys are constantly shrouded in thick, creeping mist. And as you climb, you feel that drop in temperature we discussed.
It sounds totally isolated. Are there any big towns nearby?
That is the crucial thing to understand about Bwindi. It has no central hub. There is no main town, no generic main street with strip malls, no neon signs, no tourist traps selling cheap plastic gorillas.
Just forest.
Exactly. The entire geography of tourism is decentralized. It is based purely around 4 distinct isolated park gates: Buhoma in the north, Ruhija in the east, and Rushaga and Nkurengo down in the south.
So the lodges just sprout up in the jungle around these 4 specific gates.
Yes. The immediate vibe you get upon arrival is exclusive isolation. You step out of your 4x4, and you are standing in front of a solid, imposing wall of ancient mahogany trees, massive ferns, and vines as thick as your arm. It genuinely looks impenetrable.
Which means you are essentially trapped in this beautiful, isolated canopy. You can't just stroll down the street to grab a coffee or check out a local museum. Where you sleep and what you eat becomes your entire universe outside of the actual gorilla trek.
Absolutely true.
Let's dig into the accommodation.
Because of that geographic isolation, Bwindi operates almost exclusively on a full-board lodge ecosystem. You aren't booking just a room, you are booking a life support system.
Life support system. I like that.
It's true. Your lodge provides your bed, your breakfast, your packed lunch that you carry into the jungle, and your dinner. And the financial tiers of this ecosystem scale incredibly dramatically.
Let's break those tiers down. Where does the backpacker, the budget traveler, sleep?
The backpacker or budget tier runs between 50 and 100 US dollars per person per night. You are looking at properties like Bwindi Backpackers Lodge or very small community-run rest camps.
Okay, what do you get for that?
At this price, you are securing basic, no-frills private rooms or even dormitory beds. You will likely be using shared bathroom facilities down a hall, and the full board meals provided will be very simple, heavy, local dishes.
Okay, that's survival mode.
Yeah.
What happens when you step up to the mid-range?
The mid-range tier jumps to 100 to 300 US dollars per person per night. Here you find places like Buhoma Community Haven Lodge or Rushaga Gorilla Camp.
A big step up.
The comfort level increases exponentially. You transition into large, structured safari tents built on wooden platforms or solid brick cottages. You get private, ensuite bathrooms with reliable hot showers, and the dining experience shifts toward high-quality, varied menus.
That seems like the logical sweet spot for most people. But we noted luxury lodges hitting $1,000 a night. How on earth do you build and operate a $1,000 a night experience in an impenetrable mud forest?
It requires a monumental logistical effort, and you definitely pay for it. The luxury tier ranges from 600 to 1,500 US dollars per person per night.
That's a huge jump.
It is. These are elite properties, like Volcano Safaris' Bwindi Lodge or Tracker's Safari Lodge. You are paying for premium, hyper-personalized service. Private butlers, gourmet fusion dining, roaring fires in the lounge, and massive floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the canopy.
Do we have exact numbers on those?
To give you exact 2026 data, Bwindi Lodge can reach 12,212 US dollars per person sharing during peak season. Tracker's Safari Lodge averages around 1,489 US dollars a night.
Almost $1,500 a night. Is there anything above that? Is there an ultra-luxury ceiling?
There is an ultra-luxury tier that pushes the absolute ceiling. A prime example is Clouds Mountain Gorilla Lodge, located way up in the Nkaringo sector. This routinely exceeds 1,500 US dollars per night in peak season.
Wow. What do you get for that?
For that, you are getting sprawling private stone cottages, personal indoor fireplaces, and dedicated private 4x4 vehicles at your complete disposal.
Okay, here's where it gets really treacherous, logistically speaking. You mentioned those 4 distinct park gates: Buhoma, Ruhija, Rushaga, and Nkaringo. There's a brutal rule regarding these sectors that travelers absolutely have to understand, or their entire trip is ruined.
It is the absolute golden rule of Bwindi. You must book your accommodation in the exact same sector as your gorilla permit.
Let's play this out. Say I go online, I find an amazing flash sale for a luxury lodge in the Buhoma sector in the north. But the only gorilla permit I could secure is for the Rushaga sector down in the south. Have I just hacked the system and saved a ton of money?
You haven't hacked anything. You have fundamentally destroyed your itinerary.
Destroyed it.
Yes. This highlights a failure to grasp the scale and the hostility of the terrain. Bwindi is massive. Driving between sectors, like trying to get from your lodge in the north down to the south, requires navigating the perimeter of the park on atrocious, winding, cliffside dirt roads. It takes 3 to 4 hours.
And the Gorilla Trek briefing starts strictly at 8 a.m., right?
Yes. Which means, to make your briefing, you would have to leave your beautiful luxury lodge at 3:30 or 4 in the morning. You are driving through the mountains in pitch black. And if it rained the night before, that road is highly likely to be washed out or blocked by a stuck truck.
And if you don't make it to the briefing at 8 a.m.,
you miss the trek. The UWA Rangers will not wait for you, and you instantly forfeit your $800 permit. There are no refunds for bad logistics.
that is a terrifying mistake to make. Since we established that you are essentially bound to these full-board lodges in the middle of nowhere, let's look at what happens to your daily food and tipping budget. This leads us straight into the local economy. What is the actual culinary reality on the ground?
The culinary reality is directly tied to the price of your bed. If you are staying at that luxury tier, you are eating 3-course meals crafted by highly trained chefs, blending international cuisine with premium local ingredients. It's essentially fine dining in the bush.
But if you are in the mid-range or the budget tiers, What is the fuel for this grueling hike?
Your diet will rely heavily on authentic Ugandan staples. You will eat a lot of matoke, which is deeply foundational to the local diet. It's a dish of green bananas that are steamed in their own leaves and mashed.
Green bananas, okay.
Yeah, and you will have pasho, a very dense, thick maize meal porridge. These are served alongside rice, beans, and slow-cooked beef or chicken stews. It isn't fancy, but it is hearty, extremely carbohydrate-heavy food designed specifically to give you the slow-burning energy required to climb a mountain.
What if you get a craving? What if you want to buy your own snacks or drinks? Can you just walk into a local grocery store in the village?
You cannot rely on Bwindi for that. The villages bordering the park have tiny kiosks selling basics, but if you want proper provisions, wine, specific snacks, imported goods, you need to stop at a major supermarket in Entebbe or a larger regional hub like Kigali long before you reach the forest.
Let's talk about the economics of those local towns. To put the local economy in perspective, while tourists are paying $1,000 a night up on the mountain, what is the cost of living down in the valleys?
The contrast is staggering, honestly. The grocery prices are incredibly low by Western standards. To group it together, you could walk into a supermarket in Kigali and buy a massive haul.
Like what?
Like a liter of fresh milk, a loaf of white bread, a full kilogram of beef, a kilogram of bananas, a large bottle of water, and a local beer like a Nile Special or a Club.
And what would that cost?
Your total bill would be somewhere around $5 US.
$5 for meat, fruit, staples, and a beer. That really puts the premium lodge prices into sharp relief.
Yeah.
And speaking of local food, there is a very specific street food experience that has become famous among travelers. Rolex.
Yes, the Ugandan Rolex. And to be clear, it has absolutely nothing to do with luxury watches.
Right.
The name is a phonetic play on rolled eggs. It is a staple street food where a hot omelet, often cooked with cabbage, onions, and tomatoes, is rolled tightly inside a warm, flaky chapati flatbread. It is incredible.
And how much does a Rolex set you back?
If you buy one fresh off a charcoal stove at a roadside stand, it costs roughly 2,000 to 3,000 Ugandan shillings.
Which translates to what?
About 50 to 80 cents in US dollars. It is the ultimate, authentic, local currency experience for a traveler.
I love that. Now, alongside food costs, we have to navigate the etiquette of tipping. You mentioned earlier how this ecosystem relies on tourist dollars. Tipping isn't just an afterthought here. It is a vital economic pillar, isn't it?
Tipping is absolutely essential, and you must budget cash for it. The entire safari ecosystem is built around it. Let's start with your main safari guide, the driver who picks you up at the airport, navigates the terrible roads, and manages your entire life for a week.
What's the norm for them?
It is customary to tip them 10 to 15 US dollars per day.
And for the actual day of the gorilla trek?
You will have a head UWA ranger who leads your specific group into the forest. They are armed, highly trained, and responsible for your safety and finding the gorillas. The standard tip for the head ranger is 10 to 20 US dollars.
Okay, got it.
But the most culturally and physically vital piece of etiquette revolves around the local porters.
Walk me through the porter system. Some people might feel weird about hiring someone to carry their backpack. Why is a porter so critical?
At the morning briefing, before you even see the forest, you will be introduced to a group of local men and women from the surrounding villages. You are strongly encouraged to hire one for a baseline fee of 15 to 20 US dollars. You must do this even if you think you are incredibly fit.
Why? Just for the bag?
No, because they aren't just carrying your heavy day pack and water bottles. When you hit a wall of slick, vertical mud, your porter will literally push you up from behind or pull you up by your hands.
Really?
Oh, yeah. They navigate the terrain effortlessly.
Yeah.
They are your physical lifeline. Furthermore, many of these porters are former poachers or local farmers.
Oh, wow.
Right, so by paying them directly, you are demonstrating that a live gorilla bringing in tourist dollars is infinitely more valuable to their family than a dead gorilla or cleared agricultural land.
That is a phenomenal system. It directly connects the local community survival to the gorilla's survival. And what is the tipping etiquette for the porters?
On top of that, mandatory $15 to $20 hiring fee, tipping them an extra $5 US dollars at the end of the brutal hike is standard and highly expected.
While we are discussing social rules, etiquette, and navigating the culture, there is a very serious social and legal context in Uganda that we have to address.
Yeah.
We are doing this impartially, purely as a vital safety and logistical fact that listeners need to be aware of.
Yes, it is a critical piece of the landscape. In 2023, the Ugandan government enacted severe anti-LGBT LGBTQ plus laws. These laws carry extreme, severe legal penalties.
Okay.
Therefore, it is an objective safety requirement that LGBTQ plus travelers must exercise absolute discretion while traveling through the country. It is a reality of the legal framework that simply cannot be ignored or taken lightly when planning a trip here.
Okay, so when you combine all these micro costs, the $15 a day for the driver, the $20 for the porter, the tips, the occasional roadside Rolex with the massive macro costs of the lodges and the $800 permit, it creates a highly confusing financial picture. Let's total it up. What is the actual daily out-of-pocket budget to survive and thrive here?
Let's break this down into our three distinct tiers. And to be clear, this daily burn rate assumes that the massive $800 permit fee has already been paid upfront. This is just what it costs to exist day to day.
Let's start with the absolute floor, the low-budget backpacker approach.
A backpacker needs to budget roughly $80 to $130 per day.
How does that break down?
This means you are paying about $60 for full board accommodation at a basic community lodge. You are traveling between towns using Matatus, the local shared minibus transport.
Are those reliable?
Matatus are incredibly cheap, but they stop constantly and can take days to cover a distance a private 4x4 covers in hours. This budget also factors in the $20 to hire your porter and the $10 to tip your ranger.
That is lean, and it sounds physically exhausting. Let's move to this sweet spot. What does the mid-range budget look like?
The mid-range runs between $200 and $450 per day per person. This covers a highly comfortable stay at a lodge running $150 to $250 a night.
And transport.
It assumes you are traveling with a partner or a small group, sharing the cost of a private 4x4 and driver, which amortizes down to about $40 to $80 a day per person. It easily covers your porter, your tips, and leaves you $20 to $30 a day for beers or wine at the lodge.
So if I want to do a classic 4-day, 3-night itinerary at the mid-range level, what is the total damage?
A standard 4-day mid-range trip to Bwindi will average between $1,800 and $2,200 total. And crucially, that total includes the $800 permit.
Okay, and if money is completely irrelevant? The luxury tier.
The luxury burn rate is $800 to $1,800 per day per person. You are sleeping at an all-inclusive lodge running $600 to $1,400 a night.
Plus the flights.
Right. You are amortizing the $450 domestic bush flights. You have a private, dedicated 4x4 Land Cruiser with our premium guide, and you are tipping everyone generously. A 4-day luxury trip easily hits $4,500 to $6,500 total, including the permit.
Let me throw a modern curveball at this deeply traditional safari setup. The digital nomad lifestyle is booming globally. People work from Bali, from Medellin. Can I just pack my laptop, rent a cool cabin in Bwindi for a month, and code or take Zoom calls while gorillas wander by?
The answer is an unequivocal absolute no. The infrastructure simply does not exist. Bwindi is not, and likely never will be, a digital nomad destination.
Why? Is it just the internet?
It's everything. There is no reliable high-speed internet in the forest. You're relying on patchy cellular data or extremely slow satellite links.
And electricity.
Furthermore, power is entirely dependent on localized solar panel arrays or diesel generators. That means power is intermittent. You might have electricity for a few hours in the morning and a few hours at night. Bwindi is strictly a short-term, off-the-grid safari environment.
So if someone is a digital nomad and they desperately want to see the gorillas, what is the play?
You base yourself in the capital, Kampala, or in Entebbe. You can secure a solid, reliable living setup there for roughly $800 to $1,200 a month. You work from there, and you treat Bwindi as a dedicated, fully offline 3 to 4 day excursion where the laptop stays shut.
That makes perfect sense. But perfect budgeting and planning don't matter at all if you fall into one of the massive logistical black holes that consistently ruin first-timer itineraries. Let's dig into the 3 named logistics traps detailed in the sources.
These are the classic pitfalls. Trap number 1 is widely known as the Entebbe 10-hour drive trap.
Explain the mechanism here. How does a smart traveler fall into this?
It's an illusion of scale. Most international flights arrive at Entebbe International Airport code EBB. A first-time traveler pulls up Google Maps, sees that Entebbe and Bwindi are in the same country, and thinks, I'm not paying $450 for a 90-minute domestic flight. I'll just hire a driver and do a road trip. It'll be scenic.
Which sounds completely logical on paper.
But the reality is punishing. The drive from Entebbe to Bwindi takes 8 to 10 hours in a 4x4 vehicle. And this isn't smooth highway driving. It is an exhausting, bone-rattling journey across difficult terrain, dodging massive trucks, potholes, and washed-out sections. By choosing to drive, you effectively incinerate 2 full days of your vacation itinerary just sitting cramped in a vehicle.
You save money, but you pay with your time and your spine. What is the fix?
You have 2 fixes. The
Yeah.
first is the Kigali shortcut. You fly into Kigali International Airport in Rwanda, cross the border, and drive 4 to 6 hours on vastly superior roads directly to the southern sectors of Bwindi.
Now the second.
The second fix is to simply accept the logistics tax, open your wallet, and buy the $450 to $600 US Aerolink domestic flight from Entebbe. Buy your time back.
Okay, trap number 2. We touched on this earlier with the luxury lodge example, but let's formalize it. The sector mismatch trap.
The mechanism here is a failure to understand the sheer size and topography of the park. Bwindi is divided into 4 rigid trekking sectors: Buhoma, Ruhija, Rushaga, and Karingo. What happens is a tourist goes onto a booking site, falls in love with stunning photos of a lodge, and hits book. Then, completely separately, they go to the Uganda Wildlife Authority portal to buy a gorilla permit, and they just grab whatever's available without checking if the sectors align.
Because they assume Bwindi is Bwindi, I'm in the park, I'm fine.
Exactly. And the consequence of that assumption is disastrous. As we established, booking a lodge in Buhoma but holding a permit for Rushaga guarantees a 3 to 4 hour pre-dawn drive on terrifying dirt roads. If it rains, the road washes out, you miss the briefing, and you forfeit your $800.
So booking the wrong sector is essentially like buying tickets to a Broadway show, but booking your hotel in Boston
Right.
and assuming you could just quickly drive over before the curtain goes up. What is the bulletproof fix?
The fix is simple, rigid sequencing. Always secure your gorilla permit first.
I mean, first, always.
Yes. The UWA assigns you a sector based on permit availability. Once you have that piece of paper locking you into, say, the Karingo sector, only then do you look at lodges specifically located in Karingo. Or bypass the headache entirely and use a reputable local tour operator who inherently understands this geography and manages the alignment for you.
Okay, trap number 3 shifts away from geography and into biology. The yellow fever and malaria blind spot?
The mechanism here is tunnel vision. Travelers get so hyper-obsessed with the prestige of securing the elusive gorilla permit, breaking in their new hiking boots and buying camera lenses, that they completely forget they are traveling to equatorial Africa, and they ignore standard travel health requirements.
What happens when they arrive at the airport in Entebbe without preparing for this?
They hit a hard bureaucratic wall. Uganda strictly enforces a biological entry requirement. You absolutely must present a valid yellow fever vaccination certificate upon arrival at the airport or at any land border crossing.
What if you just forgot the card at home?
Without that yellow card, you will either be denied entry to the country entirely, or you will be escorted to a border clinic and forced to receive the yellow fever vaccine right there on the spot before they stamp your passport.
That is a terrible way to start a vacation. And what about malaria?
Bwindi is situated in a high-risk malaria zone. This risk amplifies exponentially during the wet seasons when standing water allows mosquitoes to breed rapidly. Ignoring this threat because the climate feels cool is incredibly dangerous.
So what is the mandatory checklist to fix this health trap?
First, get the yellow fever vaccine administered at least 10 days before your travel date and carry the physical stamped yellow card tucked inside your passport. Second, visit a travel clinic 6 to 8 weeks prior to departure to secure prescription anti-malarial medication, typically daily pills like Malarone or atovaquone puguanol.
And bug spray.
Finally, pack heavy-duty insect repellent containing DET and use it religiously.
That feeling of intense vulnerability in the jungle isn't just about the physical mud, the steep hills, or the mosquitoes. You are stepping into an extremely volatile part of the world, both biologically and politically. Let's really analyze the safety profile, the solo travel experience, and the overall comfort level.
We have to analyze Bwindi's safety profile by splitting it into 2 distinct realities: the macro environment of Uganda as a whole versus the highly controlled microenvironment of the park itself.
Let's start with the macro context. Impartially, what do the international governments say about this region?
On a macro level, the U.S. State Department maintains a Level 3 Reconsider Travel Advisory for Uganda.
Which is pretty high.
It is. This broad advisory cites ongoing risks of crime, terrorism, and the severe 2023 anti-LGBTQ+ legislation. Concurrently, the UK's FCDO issues explicit warnings regarding banditry and violence, specifically near the DRC border. They note recent historical contexts, such as armed attacks that occurred in the nearby Kasizi district in late 2025.
That paints an incredibly intimidating picture. Both the US and the UK governments are basically waving red flags about this exact border region, citing rebel activity and banditry. Yet, right in the middle of this red zone, you have people drinking champagne in $1,000 a night lodges. How does the microcontext function?
The microcontext functions through overwhelming, highly visible security. Inside Bwindi Impenetrable National Park, the tourist experience is heavily armored. You have the Uganda Tourism Police and the UPDF, the Ugandan military, maintaining a massive active presence in the region. The security bubble is intense.
And when you leave the lodge and actually step into the impenetrable forest,
During your trek, your small group of 8 is flanked by armed UWA rangers carrying AK-47s.
AK-47s, wow.
Yeah, and it's important to note their primary job in the forest isn't just to protect tourists from external human threats. They're there to protect you from unhabituated wildlife. The forest is full of aggressive wild animals such as forest elephants, which are highly territorial and dangerous if encountered unexpectedly.
Okay, let's break down how this intense security profile and the physical environment affect specific demographics. What is the reality for a solo traveler?
For solo travel, particularly solo female travelers, the consensus is that Bwindi is safe if you are operating within the structured bubble of an organized safari.
So no wandering off alone.
Exactly. The critical advice is to avoid attempting to travel solo using the local public transport, the Matatus. You book a group tour or hire a private driver. Once you arrive at the lodge, those environments are highly secure, gated, and very accommodating to solo guests.
What about families? It sounds like an incredible educational experience. Can I bring my kids to see the gorillas?
Absolutely not. This is a hard stop. Gorilla trekking has a very strict, non-negotiable age limit. Children under the age of 15 are legally banned from tracking gorillas in Uganda.
Why 15? Is it because the hike is too hard?
It's twofold. First, children's immune systems are still developing, and they are frequent carriers of common colds and illnesses that could wipe out a gorilla family.
Oh, right. The disease risk.
Yeah. Second, it's behavioral predictability. If a 400-pound silverback suddenly bluff charges the group, beating its chest and screaming, a 10-year-old child's natural instinct is to scream and run away.
Which is bad.
Very bad. Running triggers a predatory chase response in gorillas. You need adults who can follow strict orders to crouch down, look away, and remain completely silent.
So if a family ignores this and travels there anyway, what happens?
The children are barred from the forest. They must remain back at the lodge with a hired local childminder while the parents do the trek. Frankly, when you combine the strict under-15 ban, the high malaria risk, the grueling mud, and the level 3 travel advisory, Bwindi is an objectively poor choice for a family vacation. It is highly recommended to wait until children are 16 or older.
And just to reiterate the situation for LGBTQ plus comfort and safety.
The U.S. advisory specifically highlights the severe legal risks stemming from the 2023 Anti-Homosexuality Act. While high-end luxury lodges operate as private, professional bubbles where discretion is maintained, it is an absolute necessity that LGBTQ+ travelers maintain a zero-visibility profile regarding their orientation while moving through the country. It is a strict matter of personal safety and legal compliance.
Okay, so let's weigh this out. You have intense travel advisories. You have a high risk of malaria. You have grueling vertical mud that requires a stranger to physically push you up a hill. You have prices that rival a down payment on a car. And yet, the permits sell out 6 to 12 months in advance. People are desperate to do this. What makes all of this suffering actually worth it? And conversely, what are the honest letdowns? Let's talk about the best moments first.
The absolute peak of the experience, the reason this is a global bucket list item, boils down to the 1 hour.
Put me in that hour. What does it actually feel like when you find them?
It is entirely sensory. Travelers universally describe it as the most profound, humbling wildlife encounter on Earth. Because the forest is so dense, you usually don't see them first.
You hear them.
You smell them. The silverback emits this intense, musky, sharp odor. Then you hear the crack of a massive bamboo stalk snapping. And suddenly, the thick green ferns part, and a 400-pound wild silverback steps out just a few meters away from you.
That gives me chills.
The sheer scale and intelligence in their eyes is arresting. That single moment universally justifies the $800, the grueling flights, and the mud.
It's pure magic. And we touched on the porters earlier, but the sources indicate that the human element is a huge highlight too.
Absolutely. The porter impact is massive. Handing over that 15 to 20 US dollars feels incredibly validating because it is a direct, immediate injection of capital into a local family.
It's tangible.
Right. But beyond the money, having a local person guide you, laugh with you, and physically support you when you are totally exhausted forms a genuine, profound human connection in the middle of the jungle. It elevates the entire experience.
And the environment itself, when you aren't staring at mud.
Unparalleled. Waking up in the Kigali Highlands, the Switzerland of Africa, doing that dawn drive as the mist burns off the terraced volcanic mountains, it is spectacularly, hauntingly beautiful. And for those who invest in it, the $1,500 habituation experience offers 4 deep, unstructured hours watching these animals behave naturally without the pressure of a ticking 60-minute clock.
But we promised the honest breakdown. What are the honest disappointments? Because they didn't name it the easily walkable national park.
No, they didn't. Impenetrable is not a clever marketing term invented by a tourism board. It is a highly accurate botanical description. The trek can be brutally, violently hard.
How hard is the worst-case scenario?
It is a complete roll of the dice. You might get incredibly lucky and hike for 45 minutes on relatively flat, dry ground to find a family near the park edge. Or you might spend 6 agonizing hours hacking your way up and down steep ravines with machetes, sliding in clay mud in a torrential downpour.
And you can't pick.
No. And here is the catch. You cannot choose a gorilla family based on your personal fitness level. The rangers track the gorillas. You go where the gorillas decide to go.
And once you finally endure those 6 hours and find them, the clock starts ticking instantly.
Yes. The strict 60-minute limit is an honest, crushing disappointment for many who lose track of time taking photos. The UWA rangers time the encounter to the exact minute.
No exceptions.
None. Once 60 minutes have passed, they call time and you must turn around and hike back. It does not matter if the gorillas are playing, nursing a baby, or doing something incredible, the encounter is unequivocally over.
And then there is the financial disappointment, what the sources call the logistics tax.
Right. The psychological illusion is that you are paying $800 to see gorillas. But between the $450 domestic flights, the $50 entry visas, the mandatory tips, and the high lodge prices, that baseline $800 permit quickly snowballs into a trip that costs a minimum of $2,500. It feels like you are constantly bleeding cash.
Finally, the infrastructure failures. You are bleeding that cash, you are paying luxury prices, but the jungle still wins sometimes?
It does. Even at lodges charging $300 to $500 a night, you will experience sudden power outages. The Wi-Fi is patchy at best. And perhaps most frustratingly, hot water often depends on solar water heaters on the roof.
Which needs sun.
Exactly. If it has been raining and cloudy for 2 straight days, those heaters fail, and you are taking a lukewarm or freezing shower after a freezing, mud-soaked trek, it is a harsh reality check.
So if the infrastructure failures, the logistics tax, the unpredictable mud, and the grueling trekking sound a little too miserable for your taste, let's lay out the immediate competitors. Because Bwindi isn't the only place on Earth where mountain gorillas exist.
That's right. The gorillas live across the pri-border area of the Albertine Rift. There are 2 primary alternatives to Uganda, and they present vastly different value propositions.
Let's start with Alternative 1, Volcanoes National Park in Rwanda. This is essentially the great debate in the luxury travel world, isn't it?
It is the ultimate Bwindi alternative. Let's look at the core info. Rwanda has positioned itself entirely in the ultra-high-end market. They charge a staggering $1,500 for a standard 1-hour gorilla permit.
$1,500.
That is nearly double Uganda's price.
So why on earth would anyone pay almost double for the exact same hour with the exact same animal? What is the trade-off?
You are paying for seamless, effortless infrastructure and absolute security. Rwanda offers perfect tarmac roads directly from the international airport in Kigali right to the park gates in Musanze. It is only a 2.5-hour, incredibly smooth drive.
Oh, bush flights.
No dirt roads either. The infrastructure is defined by ultra-luxury brands like Singita and One and Only. The trekking terrain in Volcanoes National Park is generally characterized by gentler bamboo-covered slopes, making it significantly less arduous than Bwindi.
And safety.
Furthermore, Rwanda operates under a Level 1 Exercise Normal Precautions U.S. travel advisory. It is fundamentally safer and easier on a macro level than Uganda.
So it's a clear binary choice based on budget and physical comfort.
Exactly. You choose Rwanda if you have a high budget, say $3,000 to $5,000 plus, and you demand a seamless, highly secure luxury experience with short, paved drives. You choose Bwindi if you want to save $700 on the permit alone, and you actively prefer a wilder, more rugged, and unpredictable jungle adventure.
Okay, what about Alternative 2? We mentioned the tri-border area. That leaves Virunga National Park in the Democratic Republic of Congo.
On paper, the DRC offers the ultimate bargain. They have the cheapest gorilla permits in the world. They charge $400 and they often discount them to $200 in the low season.
That's a huge difference.
It is. The terrain inside Virunga is spectacularly beautiful, dominated by active volcanoes, and the lodges inside the park are historically excellent.
But there is a massive but coming.
The trade-off is extreme. Life-threatening security risk. The region is highly militarized. There are dozens of active, heavily armed rebel groups operating in the immediate area. Park rangers are tragically killed in the line of duty with alarming frequency, and park closures due to sudden outbreaks of violence are a common occurrence. The U.S. State Department holds a level 4 do not travel advisory for the region.
So who is Virunga actually for?
Virunga is strictly for extreme, high-risk adventure travelers who prioritize absolute rawness and cheap permits over basic personal security. In reality, for 2026, the Bwindi versus Rwanda debate is the only realistic, safe debate that the vast majority of travelers should be entertaining.
Okay, this has been an incredible journey. Let's bring it all together for the ultimate synthesis. We have weighed the mud, the magic, the costs, the advisories, the alternatives, and the infrastructure. Let's run through the is it worth it matrix. Who should actually book this trip to Bwindi? Let's start with the backpacker.
For the backpacker, the verdict is a definitive yes.
Even with an $800 permit hanging over their head.
Yes, provided they can stomach saving up for that specific permit cost. Because outside of the permit, Bwindi is accessible. At a daily out-of-pocket rate of $80 to $130, budget travelers can pull this off. They can endure the rough overland bus travel from Kampala, sleep in basic community rest camps, and eat cheap local Rolexes.
So the permit is the only real hurdle.
The permit stings, but by choosing Bwindi, they're saving $700 right off the top compared to Rwanda. It remains the most accessible way in the world to see mountain gorillas.
What about the mid-range traveler?
The verdict here is a strong yes. This is the absolute sweet spot for Bwindi.
Why does Uganda work so perfectly for the mid-range?
Because at $200 to $450 a day, mid-range travelers have enough budget to outsmart the worst of the logistics. They can utilize the Kigali shortcut, bypassing the terrible Entebbe drive. They can afford to stay in highly comfortable and sweet tented camps with hot showers and great food.
And they can afford the permit.
Exactly, without feeling completely financially extorted. It beautifully balances the necessary comfort to recover from the hike with the wild, rugged reality of the environment.
And the family verdict.
A definitive hard NO.
Just too many intense variables.
Far too many. Between the strict legal ban on children under 15 entering the forest, the level 3 travel advisory, the high malaria risk, the mandatory yellow fever shots, and the grueling, nausea-inducing 4x4 dirt road drives, it is simply a highly stressful, inappropriate destination for young families. Wait until the kids are 16 or older and can actually participate in the trek.
Now, what about the luxury seeker?
The luxury verdict is a maybe.
A maybe. But you said they have lodges charging $1,500 a night with private butlers.
Bwindi does have spectacular luxury properties like trackers and clouds. But here's the objective reality check. If you have a budget of $800 to $1,800 a day to burn, the $700 savings on the Ugandan permit is entirely irrelevant to you.
Ah, I see where you're going with this.
Luxury travelers often find that Rwanda's Volcanoes National Park delivers a vastly superior, seamless premium experience. In Rwanda, your money buys you perfect roads and eliminates the need for terrifying domestic bush flights and punishing dirt roads entirely. If you want seamless luxury, Rwanda is usually the better play.
That makes perfect sense. Finally, let's hit the digital nomad and the solo traveler.
This is a split verdict. Solo, yes. Nomad, no.
Break that down one last time.
For a solo traveler who joins a structured, organized safari group out of Entebbe or Kigali, Bwindi is a safe, spectacular bucket list achievement. The lodges are highly secure and welcoming.
But for digital nomads,
it is a fantasy. It is impossible to rely on jungle internet for Zoom calls, and the power grid is completely unreliable. Nomads must base themselves in a city like Kigali or Kampala and treat Bwindi as a strict, offline weekend excursion.
fair enough.
And before we wrap this up, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, building on everything we've dissected today. It is the fascinating, slightly uncomfortable paradox of conservation in the 21st century. By monetizing this ancient forest at such extreme premium prices, charging $800 to $1,500 for mere hours of access, and strictly gatekeeping who can afford to enter, tourism has ironically become the ultimate shield. It is exactly this high-cost, exclusive barrier that provides the massive funding needed for armed patrols and veterinary care. It keeps the impenetrable forest impenetrable, and it is the sole reason the mountain gorilla population continues to grow rather than slide into extinction. It raises a vital question for you to explore on your own. In our modern world, does true, effective preservation always require a luxury price tag?
If this gave you the honest verdict you needed, follow the show. New episodes drop every day.
That is the honest verdict from Phil and H.